Good afternoon. This is Troy Torres with Candid News. It is 2:49 p.m. on Wednesday, June 11, 2025. Welcoming to this interview, DOC Chief Director Fred Bordallo. Mr. Bordallo, thank you so much.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Troy, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I shared with you or actually I shared with you both of the documents that I had. I
Okay.
have not published the Texas document because it is sealed in Guam. That case is sealed in Guam, but it's unsealed in the District of Texas. And so I did not want to disclose all of the information that obviously the Guam investigation needs to remain sealed or needs to be confidential for now. But as you can see from the documents that I sent you, there are alleged conspiracies that were being managed right out of the Department of Corrections, right out of your Manila facility. And they involve convicted murderer Ed Demapon. And at least one of these cases involves at least one corrections officer, allegedly, Trevor Wolford, correct?
That's correct.
Before I ask you questions about your protocols, what can you tell us about these cases and about DOC's um, either cooperation with the feds or its own investigations into these matters that predated the federal investigation?
Well, Troy, in terms of the case with the federal, we did indicate that we will support their case, their investigation, right? And
When was
the,
that was prior to the indictments or after the indictments?
this was prior to the indictments,
I
and when
see.
I was notified that they had an interest to come into our facilities and take a look at the this particular area,
Okay.
and they would have their drug task force agents, which some of them are with the Guam Police Department.
Okay.
I certainly, because even me, Troy, as a former chief of police with the Guam Police Department, I worked with a lot of, and I was a former head of the narcotics task force, the Violent Street Crimes Task Force. So we always collaborate with our federal partners, right? And anytime they can be able to, detect that there's some crime taking place in our organization, we certainly want to put a stop to that and make sure that people are held accountable to the full extent of the law. So,
Okay.
I indicated them and promised them because the case is sealed that I would refer any sort of like any kind of media inquiries, to the department, the Drug Enforcement Administration, so that if they wanted to make any comments on that ongoing case.
One case or because there's two cases actually involving Ed
Just
Demapon.
this Just this one case. There was another one recently where the Guam Attorney General's office, there was a shakedown and there was confiscation. And that one was attributed to, again, to this inmate Nemapan. It was made public, right, of that
Yeah.
shakedown and the successful confiscation of contraband while he
That
was
was
at Post Six.
that was a lot of contraband.
Yep, a lot of contraband and
Chief,
it was seized and stuff. Yes.
Chief, how does that much contraband get past your officers? You must be imagining that some or even several of your officers are involved in
We
this conspiracy.
As I previously mentioned, worst case scenario, we speculate that there could be another officer who could be involved. There's always that possibility, and that's why I think it shakes up the security force, the warden, the leadership from the security about the people. I mean, I'd be feeling kind of a little bit nervous, even as a police officer, when there's a detection of a police officer, who crosses the line and allegedly crosses the line, we'd be unsafe. We wouldn't even want to patrol that same officer if there was some public information. The credibility of that officer now is going to be tested, especially if they if they're working and all of a sudden they confiscate something. We see defense attorneys always point out that's that same officer who is under an investigation. That credibility and that trust is going to be a factor now.
So
Yep.
the according to one of the cases, the one with that really bad drug, I don't even know how to pronounce it, N-pyrrolidino or something. It's a nitazene class drug. or an benzoid opioid. It's a very dangerous drug. All right. In that one case, the feds allege one corrections officer, Trevor Wolford's involvement in a conspiracy. But taking that case and the length of that alleged conspiracy, which ran several months, according to the feds, take the other case. The length of the conspiracy ran several years with allegedly with Mr. Democon, with actors in Houston, Texas, and in Guam, and in places and other jurisdictions that the feds in their complaint in the unsealed document they don't name, right? There are these unnamed actors in unnamed areas. We are told that the scope of this meth trafficking, this drug trafficking organization that allegedly Mr. Demapon ran from inside his prison cell at the Minginao facility was close to a ton of meth over a period of time, multi-millions of dollars. How is it? You would have to agree, right, that in order for a conspiracy like that to unfold, you would need more than just one corrections officer as assisting in the conspiracy, right?
Yeah, well, we speculate that, of course, Troy, but in the things that sort of like play into this kind of, without compromising any kind of the details, what the federal prosecutors are going to look at is just exactly where, the inmate Demapan was housed at during those periods, right?
Where was he housed during this period?
He was housed in the beginning at post 16, which is where the general population of sentenced prisoners are at, right?
Okay.
Because he's a sentenced person,
Yes.
sentenced for murder, so he's in that, right? And I'll tell you this, when I came on board since August of 2023,
Mhm.
one of the first things that, of course, I was experiencing is this amount of contraband through over the fence. So if it's not around the dome areas, it's around post 16 areas and stuff. We've intercepted that and interdicted that, right? So we know things are happening, right? There's 80% of our inmates, Troy, that are suffering from or have a crime linked to drugs, right?
Yes.
And have an addiction problem, right? And I depend on a case social worker, social work, to reach out to the inmates and the families and say, it doesn't do any good for them when you throw and you're feeding their addiction and stuff like that. They have to stay off of that, especially the sentenced ones.
But Chief, in this case, the Demapon case, what the feds are spelling out in that complaint isn't necessarily drugs entering the prison as much as it is a drug trafficking organization of drugs being sent throughout Guam, being run from inside the prison, which required that Mr. Demapon had several cell phones. There was evidence in the phone conversations or the text message conversations allegedly between Mr. Demapon and Miss Cabrera from the Houston area, talking about drugs inside the prison, sure, but the feds are alleging that this drug trafficking organization is what ran drugs throughout the island. And so my question is, on top of how do you get drugs inside the prison, aside from, throwing it over the fence and hoping that it gets to the right area and to the right person, right? I'm talking about through the doors, getting drugs through the doors and into the hands of the inmates. But more importantly, how does it escape the attention of so many corrections officers that Mr. Demapon had multiple cell phones in his cell?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, the challenge again of the correction, you're short of personnel. These officers have been working since I came on board. They've been working 12-hour shifts, right?
Okay.
We're short of security personnel, right? Sometimes I'll tell you this: one of the key things about interdicting, whether it's cell phones that have been thrown over or drugs that have been thrown over, you have to look at individuals coming in and out of the prison. The employees themselves have to be checked. There have to be security checks on the employees. There have to be security checks on the vendors coming in to deliver. There was an instance where we caught one vendor and he had a contraband. It wasn't illegal drugs, but it happened to be tobacco products, which is contraband. And he had more than enough. The supply of that didn't appear to be just for his personal use, but that vendor was put on notice right there of that that's a security violation to try and bring something like that because suspected of maybe trying to bring in tobacco products too, because that's considered contraband, right? And we've had, again, like I said, part of the security process among our staff is to, always check that the perimeter when it's visitor time. I'll tell you this, one officer noticed that after visiting hours, the inmates look suspicious, but they always have to routinely check them out. Sure enough, found drugs on the inmate after visitation. Can you imagine that? And the visitor was detained and arrested too. We call Guam police. We're tracking and everything to ensure that this thing is a case number is obtained. Sometimes I found out when I came on board that when they find some contraband, it could be even minor. Oh, well, we won't call GPD. We'll just have it. The inmate will face the disciplinary board. No, I've made it known in my policy. I don't care if it's a pack of cigarettes, you will call GPD and get a case number for it because how do you know something that small might be the payment, for the drugs or something like that? Cigarettes could be used as a bartering thing. So even that small. So,
Is
the
there a
security
local
force has that
is
job.
there a local criminal investigation into uh, contraband and the possible involvement of DOC officers in the conspiracy to bring in contraband to the prison?
So far, there was just only that indictment with
Federal,
the,
the federal one.
it's been federal that already been made public with Officer Wolford on
Okay.
that public. There's been no other officer that's come across our radar, but our internal affairs, anytime they're like, we just recently seized again, and we had to move Mr. Demapan from post 6 to another area in the housing more, hopefully more secured now. We launched an internal affairs because we want to know who's on that shift. I worked in correctional facilities, Troy, and I'll tell you this. When I tell the oncoming shift, everything is all normal and secure. That shift that relieves me, trust that I said everything was all normal, meaning that I did my job in checking every cell to make sure the inmates are there, no one escaped. And two, there's nothing suspicious of anything being brought in that can harm not only the inmate there, would be harmful, but also the staff too.
We have this case where the feds are alleging that Mr. Demapan ran an organization that harmed a great deal of Guam. Uh, and and so our audience just would like to understand how it was possible that he ran this organization from within the prison. We know from the case, from the complaint from the feds that it was the use of multiple cell phones. So how, first, Chief, I guess, when a corrections officer in Manila gets on duty, do they have to go through one area and clock in one area, like go through one set of doors?
When the correction shift changes, right? You have a briefing similar to how Guam Police when you have a shift change, right?
Okay.
What is the previous shift experience? What are the kind of things that need to pass on, and what does the director or the warden have any additional information to pass on, right? To make sure you be alert, and make sure that these are some of the security concerns. We had one time where we heard inmates were using the alcohol sanitizers, right? And using that to consume alcohol. And that's, I mean, alcohol sanitizers. That's the one we use for COVID, right? So we had to now use that as a controlled product now, not being given out to inmates anymore, the alcohol sanitizers. I've been reading up on a lot of other things. Sometimes they request for pine sol, to be used to clean their cells. But we found out pine sol is another product that could be used and weaponized, right? So in this kind of thing, the officer always reports with the platoon for a briefing and what happens, and before they secure, they debrief too, right?
But
And
but but
that's
I-
when,
I'm talking more about the logistics of it. Like when let's say I'm a corrections officer and my
yeah,
shift starts at 5 p.m. So I get there at 4:45 p.m. Is
yeah.
there is there like a just one area where I enter the facility to clock in?
Oh yeah, yeah. You have to go to the main control center
The
in
main
order to
control
get.
center. Okay. Okay. So
Yeah,
there's one entrance and when you clock out, one exit, right?
one exit. That's right.
Okay. My question, just I beg your indulgence here. So let's say I'm coming in to the main control room to clock in. I have a cell phone on me in my pocket. It's my personal cell phone. And there's the thing to clock in or whatever. Is there a sentry there, or is there someone there who will pat me down, will discover that I only have one cell phone, but or whatever it is, I have one pen, I have one cell phone, I have a notepad, uh, and these are the things, sort of like a security checkpoint,
Yeah.
right? And
Yes.
so it's noted in the logbook that, Troy Torres, corrections officer one, has come to the facility with one cell phone, one pen, it's this color, and one notepad that's this color. And
Yeah.
then
Our
when I
control. Yeah.
leave, when I clock out, I have to be able to show that I have these same items on me. Otherwise, if I don't, is there a report that I lost it? And when was the report, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? Like,
That's right.
and of
Yeah.
course, checking me if I have drugs, or if I have contraband, anything else that's
That's
on
right.
me. Is there a process like that that exists? And is it
Yeah.
100% followed?
You actually described the process that happens. Even I get search and hand search when I come in there, and I'm just coming over there to visit the warden, and they have to search me down to find out what I have.
And it's
And anything,
100%?
yeah, yes,
Okay.
100%. And what also has to happen too, if that officer has that cell phone, there have to be documentation. He got to prove to have that cell phone brought in, right? Too,
Okay.
because we have rules and regulations on bringing communications equipment into, bringing stuff in like that, right?
Okay.
So that's the where the area is at for corrections officers coming in, that they have to be searched too, and they have to be checked to make sure that if they did bring in their cell phone, it was authorized for their cell phone to be brought into,
And that
right?
same cell phone is the one that they're bringing out of the
Yeah.
facility. Okay.
Same out when it's time to leave too.
And okay, so then do you guys publish, or is it known to other corrections officers who will be at that security gate and on any given day? Or do you guys mix up their schedule? Who will be checking at this
I
checkpoint?
believe that I believe the security operations from the warden and the platoons and the shifts, sometimes there's movement around there. I don't get too specific into the weeds of who is going to be assigned the control at that time, right? But I leave it up to, of course, the warden, the operations commander. She's real good, Mary Lazama, right? And then of course the platoon commanders, right? To make those assignments, and who, similar to each day is different. Even at going to the Guam police, I don't know what beat area I'm going to be assigned to. They don't always want us in the same beat, but they surely want us that if we're going to be assigned to a housing or like post six, the disciplinary, uh, that it's those inmates at post six are their most biggest dangerous ones versus the ones in post 16 that is general population sentence, and post 17 where some of the individuals are former law enforcement officers and individuals who have been government witnesses to that they have to watch out for, and the other housing areas.
So, if there are these protocols and these protocols are being followed, then the fact that there is contraband, is such a tremendous amount of contraband found, does that not raise an alert to you that there is a tremendous amount of collusion happening in order for these things to come in?
I've always had that concern. Troy, in my 5 years, I worked at three different correction facilities in a military base. We have to sanitize everything. When one fork is missing on the dining facility at the correction facility I had, no one goes anywhere secure until we find that one fork. And that's a correction facility. I worked at Quantico, where John Hinckley, the one who shot President Reagan, was that everything was, the entire base is locked down. But even with an entire Marine Corps base locked down in a correction facility in a highly secure military base, in the restroom area, we would find contraband, whether it was a makeshift nunchaku stick, very creative, from military prisoners who get training in their education a little bit higher than regular civilian prisons, right? They're trained. and from the Marines and stuff, and that some of them have that kind of thing. So there is no, which always uh, sort of gave me that there's no absolutes in security, no absolutes when it comes down. This is the most secure facility. If that can happen even in a Marine Corps base, in the most tightly secured base where officers go through training in Quantico, it can happen even in our own Guam prison, which is, we try to do the best as the other prisons and the other correctional facility and jail taking place in the other things in the mainland. It's not an excuse, but it gives, our corrections officers, if they want to survive their shift, they don't certainly want, because it was recently, even during my time, where we found a firearm, and that was made public when we were in a lockdown for 3 straight days of a high security threat. And we found it in the same area, I believe post 5 or post 6 of the firearm. And, Troy, the last time a firearm was used, there were some inmates that were injured. We certainly don't want to see an officer get harmed too with the kind of stuff that we're finding in this contraband.
So, Chief, this is egregious conduct. This is, this is pretty bad. And if the source reports are true that this drug trafficking organization was responsible for more than a ton of meth, or almost a ton of meth being moved throughout the island, then this makes it not just the largest drug trafficking organization to be taken down, but also the biggest law enforcement corruption case in the federal government on Guam, in the District of Guam. Since discovering this, since the feds told you about this, what have you done to drop the hammer over at DOC? And our heads going to roll.
Well, I can't say, because our internal affairs, administrative investigations, we got to make sure that we don't lose on any kind of technicality. I've seen, even I recently had a case at Civil Service Commission where a captain, right, took contraband and put it in his vehicle. The Civil Service case ruled against me, on that. And, I'm very cautious about how we handle our cases. I don't want any kind of technicality, especially when it comes down to administrative investigations and stuff and all that. That's why I don't want to, compromise, what we're doing. But I think the staff know. I think the staff and security staff know. And I think Lieutenant Governor, because it was just timeliness of this situation. We were going through Corrections Week. We're trying to recruit more of our civilian community to come in and join the Guam Department of Corrections. Not one correction officer or two defines the entire corrections officers that are honest and hardworking, try to making ends meet, and work and have a successful career in corrections and stuff and all that, right? But we certainly want to ensure to the public too their confidence that we are making strides to identify, to get information. There's a unit that I established here called the Security Threat Intelligence unit. And that was, there are some operations and activities that that this unit is doing to collect information and intelligence from some individuals are providing us information. Of course, I'm not going to say what inmate or what, where it's coming from, right? Because that could be, jeopardize the inmate from whatever housing area. But that's the kind of sort of like action, that happens in a correction facility. If you have an intel unit, they might be able to see what's happening inside those housing areas, right? We need to invest more, and with the $1 million we have, and I think the legislature, the governor's committing us. Remember the $5 million? I think one is coming to us, but we may use the other 4 to build up hardening the facilities with technology and some surveillance equipment and stuff that we need to find out what's going on. Those are the kind of things that I hope brings light at the end of the tunnel, to include expanding our corrections force, because they're so short, 12-hour shifts, and then it could demoralize some of the officers to say, I'm out of here, right? And I don't think the community wants us to drop way below to 160 or 4. We will be in an emergency situation if we even get down to 150 with the rising inmate population.
I'll get to the pay issue in just a second, which is going to be the last issue that I bring up. But I do want to stay on this issue of dropping the hammer. So you're not able to provide details as to the operation that you have ongoing to address the crisis in confidence, but can you at least tell us when the public might be able to see some first fruits of this investigation, meaning finding out who else has been involved in this and getting rid of them from DOC and reporting them to the feds and to the Guam Police Department?
I would just say within the next 2 months, we should probably start seeing, because we're wrapping up some of our,
Okay.
our administrative investigation, and it is a serious situation that we have. I don't want any, again, like I said, any technicalities. I'd like to do this cautious. We're in consultation with the Office of the Attorney General of Guam that advises us, so that make sure there's just that the action that I take is going to be solid,
Okay, so the
but
AG's office is involved in this ongoing investigation then.
yes, yes. I always keep the Guam Attorney General, every single critical incident report and these things, a copy goes to not only our intel unit, but also to the Guam Attorney General's office. So they're in the loop to see what's happening. Because Troy, as I think he indicated, there have been a number of cell phones that we've confiscated, right? I hope it's not, of course, and I trust our partners at the Guam Police Department. They have the expertise, and I know they can use the feds to look through those cell phones and find out what kind of communication is going on. If there's no effort on that of examining these cell phones that have been confiscated, then we're in the dark. We don't know what's happening, right? So we just really hope that if it wasn't for nothing, because we seized a lot of. I can tell you that since I came on board, since August 23, there have been a number of cell phones we confiscated in the housing areas. They're being smart. They're trying to get it away from themselves and put it in a common area by the restroom, so they don't get tagged, for promotion of contraband, because now it's in a common area, and stuff and all that, right? But it's still something that should still be examined, because you never know what could be in that cell phone.
Let's get to the last issue, and that is the incentive that corrections officers have to remain honest. When I was in the government, I remember that the corrections officers, along with youth affairs officers, were the lowest paid among law enforcement. Does that continue to be? Corrections officers are among the lowest paid in law enforcement in the government of Guam.
I believe we had the 25%. We started. I just got. I was in a meeting with Major Ugin, who told me it was actually the corrections Department of Corrections that started with the first 25% in differential pay, and then other agencies started to jump in to try and see whether they can get 25% differential pay. And part of that differential pay, on top of the hazard pay they had, was that they're working in a place, a confined space, where they're supervising prisoners, right? And that's an incentive in itself, right? I think there was one person who asked, who had communicated to me social media, saying, no matter what, it doesn't matter who you hire, there's greed and stuff. But I'll tell you this, Troy, there's no price on your honor and your integrity. That can't be so, right? And
Well,
that's
well, well,
something
well, for
that
some people, and we've seen over the years in law
yeah,
enforcement throughout Guam that
yeah,
some people do have a price. And
yeah.
so my question is, is this an issue? And if it's an issue, is this something you'll be bringing to the legislature or to the governor's office asking for some sort of increase in base pay for your corrections officers?
Well, I believe that the corrections officers make the pay is great right now. Where
Okay, so the pay is fine.
yeah, the pace
The pay is
is
fine. Okay.
the pay is fine. What I'm concerned about is the hours. That's why we want more of the
You want to
help
recruit
and to
more.
security, recruit more. And there's
Okay.
a lot of things on the table that are optional. That, like what other jurisdictions are doing, even if it means adding more to the force through something like privatizing a transportation portion, and that portion we won't have to take over transport services. Sometimes there's some jurisdictions where well, I just found out from Major Uggan, who suggested too, that the Department of Corrections used to have what they call detention officers. Guam Police Department has detention officers, right? And it's the same thing as a corrections officer, but it doesn't have the same sort of like rigorous, like the post certified kind of courses, because they're not going to be that. They're mostly interacting with pretrial detainees, right? And if we can get more of that on board too, right? And increase that, it makes the corrections force better, because now you reduce their working hours. 12 hours is very stressful. It's taxing on individuals. What I have to do, what I've had to do, and I shared this, is I don't refuse. I don't deny leave. Some of our corrections officers, they might feel burnout and they want to request relief to be with their family. They need that to sort of like get some rest, and it's stressful, right? And if I don't do that, some of them, the corrections officer, would either sometimes say, I'm going to resign, or do something different, right? And we don't want our force to drop down. We want the public. I need the help and the support of the public to say, come and help, and let's support our corrections officers, right? Troy, when I was chief of police, we had businesses that came forward and helped out the Guam Police Department, whether it was a car or whether it was tools or some resources. The business community has been very generous. I like to just say I found some business organizations that are very generous with Department of Corrections, especially with the supply of things, not only for our corrections officers, but for the inmates here too, with their hygiene products and stuff. We don't have a robust budget, but if it wasn't for the generosity with some businesses donating stuff, that's really helped out. Really, really, really big.
Chief, I want to thank you for your time. Please keep us updated on developments in your administrative investigation or your internal
Yeah.
investigation,
Yeah.
and also wherever you can on this criminal investigation into the alleged drug trafficking organizations that were run straight out of the prison.
Yeah.
Please keep us updated.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. God
All right.
bless you. You have a good day.
Okay. God bless you. Okay.
Thank you.